presidential case from the courtroom would be unprecedented. Now, other presidents or former presidents have gone before court before. I mean, there's been situations like that, but this would be very unusual because he is running or wants to run for president. Okay, so that would be a very, very... sheriff is a very specific term that some police departments still use. If you like to watch, again, old cowboy movies from a long time ago, often we said there was a sheriff, and, they wear a star, a sheriff. And so that would be like the police chief, right, of a town. Some police departments in America still use this term. They say the sheriff's department instead of the police department. They may say the sheriff's department, and the person who is that would have this title, and the person under them would be called a deputy. So that term is still used, but not everywhere. It's not like you can always use this term. So probably most police departments in America would simply say the police chief, right? They would say the police chief. Just like I think in Taiwan we use that term too. So anyhow, but this is a good word. Why don't we say together sheriff, sheriff, deputy, deputy. Yeah, if you like watching cowboy movies, you hear this term all the time. There's always a sheriff. Okay, so let's read this together. I think we've covered it. Okay, the former president and the favorite to fight next year's U.S. presidential election for the Republicans gave himself up to U.S. Marshals in Miami for a hearing that set up the unprecedented scenario. Okay, let's say those two words. Unprecedented scenario of a White House race litigated from the courtroom, as well as at the ballot box. Ballot box. Yeah, and a ballot box, of course, is a box that you put your ballot into. It's very interesting because Taiwan still uses ballot boxes. In America now, different states, they have different systems. Maybe they use a voting machine or something. But I've seen in Taiwan where they still actually have a ballot and they put it into a box, which I think is great. I like that. But anyhow, yeah, that's what we say, a ballot box. A what? Yeah, to to be honest, I have very little personal experience voting in America because I've spent most of my life in Taiwan. You can mail in a ballot. America allows you to do a ballot to vote by mail, but you have to register and it's a lot of mafan. But yeah, if you go to a voting booth, and it's interesting because different states will have different voting systems, and sometimes that causes trouble because sometimes it's slower or faster. Sometimes people will claim that it's rigged, there's something wrong with it, or there's a technical problem, and I'm sure you've seen that before, heard about that in the news before. Yeah. You say court martial, like a courthouse. No, actually not. A court martial would be like a police officer. Oh, a court martial. Okay, wait. I was hearing yeah, that's just you spelled differently. Yeah, a court-martial is a military, but that's spelled differently. That's spelled court-martial. So it's not spelled as an M-A-R-S-H-A-L. Yeah, yeah. And martial has a military meaning to it. To court-martial somebody. I believe that's spelled correctly. Yeah. So yeah, a court-martial is a military court. Okay. So if I'm a soldier and I commit a crime, or I'm accused of committing a crime, then there will be a court-martial. Or we can use this as a 动词 also. You can say he was court-martialed because of something. Okay. So why don't we say together, court-martial? Court-martial. Yeah. It's interesting because as I understand it, and I may be wrong, but Taiwan right now currently does not have a court-martial system, right? I believe military personnel are charged in civilian court, right? They're sent to a civilian court. Now, actually, that's a good word. I'll write that down just for you because it's a good word to know. Civilian. What does civilian mean? Civilian means not military. So I believe probably most of you are civilians. Civilians means you're not in the military. So if we have a civilian court, that would be the normal court, right? But a court-martial would be a military court. So we have military and civilian. Both they're different. So I believe, if I'm correct, in Taiwan currently, they changed the law years ago that soldiers would be charged or tried rather in a civilian court and not a military court. And I just recently saw the news that some people say they should bring back this court-martial system for the Taiwan military for various reasons. Yeah. So anyhow, that's a different situation. Okay, so let's read this. Go on then. It says here, on the eve of his 77th birthday, Trump appeared before a magistrate judge to be formally presented with 37 counts under 7 charges brought by a special counsel probe that opened after an FBI raid of his Florida mansion 10 months ago. Okay, so on the eve of his 77th birthday, what does that mean? What is eve? Well, but it means actually on the night. It could mean literally the night before, his 70s. I don't know if it actually was, or sometimes it means just before something. So you could say, it could just mean it just prior to or just before. But it could actually mean the night before his 77th birthday. So that's why we say Christmas Eve, right? Is 24号, 12月24号, because it's the night before Christmas, or New Year's Eve, right? On the 31st, the night before New Year Day. So anyhow, we say on the eve of his 77th birthday, he appeared before a magistrate judge. Now, to be honest, I don't know all the technical terms, but a magistrate can be used in many different ways. In fact, this term can be used to describe somebody who is like a 县长. I know in Taiwan, when we were writing the news, sometimes they would say that, before when there was a Taichung Xian, right? We would say the Taichung County Magistrate. They would use that word. But here, of course, it's used in a different way. It's a specific kind of judge. And I won't pretend to understand what determines a magistrate judge, but it's a court term. It's a kind of judge. Why don't we say together, magistrate? Magistrate. Okay, so he appeared before this judge to be formally presented. Of course, formal means it was officially presented with. They showed him 37 counts under 7 charges. So here actually they separated. Charge would be, I guess, in the court would be a bigger case, a bigger. You're charged with a crime, and then under that crime you could have many counts. I'll give you an example. This is a good example that even I understand. For example, you could say he has been charged with 3 counts of murder. Okay, So murder is a charge, right? Charged with murder. But let's say you're accused with killing 3 people. So then we say 3 counts of murder, means not just one person, but 3 people. Okay, does everybody understand that? Because it's almost like you're counting how many times have you done this. So if, for example, if you're accused of corruption, 贪污, you could say 5 counts of corruption. It means there's 5 different corruption things or times that you were accused of 贪污 corruption. Okay, so anyhow, 37 counts under 7 charges, 7 different crimes, but there's 37 of these counts. Brought by a special counsel probe. Now, probe we've talked about before. This is another word for what? Investigation, 调查, right? To probe something. It could be a 动词 or 名词. Okay, so why don't we say together, probe? Probe. Okay, special counsel probe. When we talk in America about a special counsel, it's like they appoint a special investigator, a special group to specially investigate this particular crime. So in big cases or special cases or sensitive cases, they might have a special counsel. Okay, it's like almost like I believe a special like 调查员 or something, someone who goes and investigates that case. We call it special counsel probe that opened after an FBI raid of his Florida mansion. And what's a mansion? What kind of building? Yeah, huge building. Usually it's a beautiful building. I guess in Taiwan, sometimes we'd say 豪宅, right? It's like a beautiful, now when I think about a mansion, I think of a building. It's not like an apartment. It's like a building that is by itself, 独立, it's its own building. So even in Taiwan, we have some mansions. You drive around, you see this amazing building, and someone lives there. We might call that a mansion. Okay, so why don't we say that together? Mansion. Mansion. Okay. In the entrance? Yeah, I think I have. Very old buildings. Yeah, but they're very, very rare. Yeah, I don't know if I can't think of one specific one, but I'm sure I have seen something like that here before. So, okay, so let's read this together. On the eve of his 77th birthday, 77th birthday, Trump appeared before a magistrate judge to be formally presented with 37 counts under 7 charges brought by a special counsel probe that opened after an FBI raid of his Florida mansion 10 months ago. Right. Well, that's what he says. So actually, he used a very good term here. You'll probably hear this term again. So a witch hunt. That's a good term. Does everybody know what a witch hunt is? So what's a witch? Yeah. So what is that in Chinese? It's a 巫婆. Okay. But of course, if you say this investigation is a witch hunt, does anyone know why we use that term? Does anyone know the history behind that? So, what? Europe, but also in the yeah. So specifically, there was a place in America where witch hunts. I think you know the term. New England. Have you all heard of New England? Where's New England? What part of the United States? Northeast. So it would be, but the very Northeast, like Massachusetts and Vermont and New Hampshire and Connecticut, that part of the country up there. And that's some of the earliest colonies, 殖民地 of what became the United States. So in that area during the colonial era, when America was still the 殖民地, was still a colony, not the United States, there were these witch hunts. And of course, a witch hunt would be like, somebody says, oh, that woman is a witch, right? And therefore, and that's, they at the time they said, well, that's wrong, that's evil. And often this person would be accused, probably unfairly, right? And sometimes and often killed because they said, oh, she's evil, we have to burn her or have to do something. And so this happened in Europe, of course, but it also happened in New England. And so so now when we use this term, it means that we're accusing something, we're looking for something to accuse somebody of, even though it's not real, it's not true. We're going to use that to attack them and bring them down, Now, probably not kill them, but to bring them down. So Donald Trump, I know he's already said this. He said this is a witch hunt. Okay, so if someone feels like they're being attacked, someone's using something to attack them to bring them down. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Anyhow, it's a very common term today. Why don't we say together, witch hunt? Witch hunt. Okay, and then New England. New England. Okay, so here, that's a photo caption, but here it says, however, he dismissed his prosecution as politically motivated in a speech to supporters, framing the indictment as an effort to interfere in next year's election. Okay, so this is Donald Trump. Now, he dismissed his prosecution. Prosecutor, of course, is a 调查员, right? But a prosecution, if you are being prosecuted by something, it means you are being accused or charged with something. You're being investigated. So he dismissed this prosecution as politically motivated. So basically, when you dismiss something, of course, it means that 这个没有什么, this is nothing real. If you dismiss, so if someone says, you did this, or, you should pay attention, and you dismiss it. For example, let's say somebody warns you, 警告. They say, hey, you have to be careful when you're driving. It's very dangerous out there. And you dismiss it. You say, nah, it's okay. It's fine. No problem. Or someone says, hey, you shouldn't go out because it looks like it's going to rain hard. And you dismiss that. You say, nah, it'll be fine. It'll be okay. Kind of like to ignore. It's kind of like to say, this is 没有什么. So anyhow, he dismissed this prosecution. He's like, this is nothing. As he says it is, or as he's saying this is politically motivated. In other words, this is because of politics, because of 政治, because of this election. It's motivated. Motivation is 动机. It's motivated. It's caused. It's triggered by politics. Does everybody understand that? Okay. So why don't we say these words together? Dismissed. Dismissed. Politically motivated. Politically motivated. Right. And we all have motivations, right? What motivates you to get up in the morning? What motivates you to come to this class and learn English? What motivates you to go to work? We are motivated by different things, maybe success or ambition or money or whatever. So politically motivated in a speech. He gave a speech to his supporters, framing the indictment. Now, of course, to indict is 起诉. You can say he was indicted, 被起诉. Now, indictment is the 名词, the noun for indict, indictment, indict, okay? Now, remember, I know we've learned this word before. We do not pronounce the C. It's like D-I, it's almost like I-T-E, I-ite, right? No C. So why don't we say this word together? Indict. Indict. Okay, indictment. Indictment. Okay, so Donald Trump he is framing the indictment as an effort to interfere in next year's election. Of course, interfere means to get involved, to affect, to influence, 影响 next year's election. Now, if you say, I am framing this as this, what does this word framing mean? This is a 动词. Yeah, I see back there you're saying this, right? So a frame is like a window frame, a picture frame. But when we frame something, well, okay, so there's two different meanings here. This framing means I am saying this is actually that. I'm almost like picturing something as something else. Okay, so for example, I'm trying to think of a good example, an easy example. You could say, he framed this whole disagreement as a joke. He's saying that, this whole disagreement or this whole argument that we're having, it's all just a joke. Don't worry about it. So it means that I'm trying to put this situation in a frame. I'm trying to say this is what it really is. Okay? I'm saying this is not what you think it is. It's something else. Does everybody understand that? So it's almost like you're trying to help people see it from a different perspective. 不同的角度. You're framing something so that people look at it in a different way. But you just used it in a slightly different way. And if you frame somebody, it means you accuse them of something that is, you're trying to accuse them of something that maybe they didn't do. I guess it's very similar, but it is if you say I was framed, it means I was unjustly accused of something, falsely accused of something. So let's say your company loses a lot of money and the boss, the 老板, comes to you and says, hey, you stole that money. That's why we don't have that money. And you can say, I was framed. He's framing me for the loss of this money. Okay. Something like that. But here you can frame a situation as something else. It means you take the situation and you say, no, it's not what it looks like here. It's actually this. It's not that. You have to look at it from a different way. And so he's saying, well, no, this isn't, when you look at this isn't a case like this. This is actually has to do with the election. It's all related to the election. So we frame it in a different way. It's almost like if you take a picture and you put it in a different frame, right? You change the frame so it looks different. Anyhow, I hope you kind of understand what this word framing means. It has different kinds of ideas. But it's a good word. It's a good expression. Okay, so let's read this. However, he dismissed his prosecution as politically motivated. Let's say it again. Politically motivated. In a speech to supporters, framing the indictment as an effort to interfere in next year's election. Right. Okay. So he says, this is Donald Trump talking. He says, today we witnessed the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country. Very sad thing to watch, Trump said after returning to his summer residence in New Jersey. Okay. So he said, today we've seen, or we've witnessed, of course, witness is to see something, the most evil and heinous abuse of power. Now, before I talk about this word, abuse of power is, what does abuse mean? Right, to use something in a wrong way. That's why we talk about drug abuse, right? Because you're taking drugs and you're using them in the wrong way. Or alcohol abuse. If you drink a beer, it's probably fine. But if you drink 10 beers, you're probably abusing alcohol. You're misusing it, right? So abuse is to misuse, okay? Misuse. So abuse of power is to misuse power, okay? Now here he says it's the most evil. I think you know evil, right? Evil. But what is heinous? Well, it's kind of like, I guess you could say terrible. heinous just means something that is just really horrible. It's terrible. It's I guess, yeah, wrong. But yeah, if you describe something as being very, I'll tell you where this word gets used a lot. It gets used a lot with we say a heinous crime. You know, a terrible crime, a really bad, something that makes everyone feel terrible. It just is awful, right? So yeah, I almost always see this word with crime. We say a heinous crime. He committed a most heinous crime, or yeah. Or we could say a heinous person. You know, someone is really awful, really terrible, heinous person. But crime, I think this is the word I think is used the most often. Anyhow, yeah, bad. It's really bad. So why don't we say together, heinous? Heinous. Okay, so he's saying it's the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country, the worst ever. Very sad to watch. I notice Donald Trump likes to use this term. He always says, very sad. This is very sad. This, you know, he always says this. So very sad to watch, a very sad thing to watch. Of course, that's an incomplete sentence, but he's just saying it that way. That's what he said. Very sad to watch. Okay, Trump said after returning to his summer residence in New Jersey. Now, you know, I know that, you know, Donald Trump has a lot of money, but in America, people who have more money or richer or wealthier, they often will have a summer home, okay? Like a home they go to in the summer. And usually, not always, but sometimes it's on the beach, you know. I notice that in the East Coast, many people like to have summer homes in Long Island or New Jersey and places like that, or Delaware near the ocean. But sometimes people, I guess, they might have a summer home in the mountains, right, where it's cooler. So where you want to be cool in the summertime or by the ocean, by the water, you might have a summer house. And people buy them as a, you know, vacation home, but they might also buy it as an investment, right? You could sell it. Maybe if it's a nice area, you can sell it later on. So actually, I have friends who have summer homes, and they're not really rich, actually. I mean, they're just average people, but they bought a second home. So why don't we say together, summer residence? Summer residence. Okay, let's read this. Today we witnessed the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country. Very sad thing to watch. Trump said after returning to his summer residence in New Jersey. New Jersey. You know, New Jersey is a state. Actually, I've heard New Jersey, the size of New Jersey is roughly the same size as Taiwan. It's about the same size, I think. But it's right next to New York. It's just east of New York. It's funny because New Jersey has a very, how do I put it? It has a very interesting reputation among Americans. If you say New Jersey, different things come into Americans' minds. New Jersey often has many Americans, when they think of New Jersey, they think of a very crowded, industrial, perhaps not attractive state, because there's a lot of industrial areas near New York in New Jersey. However, if you said New Jersey Shore, which means the coast, Hai'an, then it sounds a little bit better. It sounds like, okay, like there's a big city that's very famous for its casinos called Atlantic City. You know, they have their Dubochang there. And actually, Donald Trump is a big investor, I believe, in Atlantic City. I think there's a Trump casino in Atlantic City. But yeah, Atlantic City is kind of it's like Las Vegas for the East Coast. People, if they want to go to Dubo, they might go to Atlantic City, New Jersey. Yeah. So, okay. Let's read a couple more paragraphs and then we'll maybe go to a different story. It says the hearing, of course, this means the court hearing. The hearing, just weeks after Trump denied state-level financial fraud charges in a separate case in Manhattan, came with the former reality TV stars mounting legal woes, threatening to derail his bid to return to the Oval Office. Okay, so there's a lot of good terms here. So, first of all, the court hearing, this court hearing that we're talking about, and then they create this phrase here, right? This is a separate phrase. Just weeks after Trump denied state-level financial fraud charges. So he was charged in a different case. Now, this was not a federal, Zhongyang case. This is a state case, okay? State-level financial fraud charges, okay? Now, financial fraud, what is fraud? We talked about this before. If you 骗人, right? Or 骗的政府 or something, or you make something false, then it's fraud. Okay, in Taiwan, sometimes I hear about fraud cases, but financial fraud charges. So he's being accused of financial money-related fraud. I think fraud usually involves money. I guess it could be other things. You could have a fake identity, your ID or something, but usually it's money. So he denied. Of course, he said I was not guilty of state-level financial fraud charges in a separate case in Manhattan. So this would be in New York State. Okay, all of this came with the former reality TV stars mounting legal woes. Now, I don't know if you know this. I think you know this. Donald Trump's famous for many things. Of course, he's famous as a businessman. He has many businesses and hotels and property. But he also had a reality TV show. Do you know this? Okay, what is reality TV? Yeah. Do they have that in Taiwan? They do? Okay. So reality TV, of course, can be very popular. And Donald Trump had a reality TV show, and it was called The Apprentice. Yeah. And I watched this show. I mean, before he was president, I remember watching this TV show. Yes, exactly. So do you all know this show, or have you heard about this show? Okay. So The Apprentice. And what's an apprentice? So yeah. Now it's not like a intern. Intern is like a 实习. Yeah, we say an intern. Okay, like right now there's interns at COMPASS magazine. But an apprentice is almost like somebody who studies with you. They work under you, and then you teach them what you know. You teach them a skill, and then they can learn how to do that skill. Now, in long time ago, apprentice might be for anything. Like if I learn how to make shoes, or I learn how to make a watch, or I learn how to, be an ironsmith or something, we have to apprentice maybe many years to learn that skill. I know they did that in China, they did that in Taiwan. I know sometimes in Taiwan when you hear about somebody who has a very specific skill, they know how to do some sort of art or craft, and maybe they have to find an apprentice to learn from them. So why don't we say it together? Apprentice. Apprentice. Okay, so Donald Trump had this show called The Apprentice. And of course, what would happen is, if you haven't watched this, he would have a group of men and women who would do business under him. And of course, every week he would evaluate. He would kind of see how they're doing. And if they didn't do well, somebody, you just said, he would say, "You're fired." Yeah, of course. So the whole point was that one by one they would get fired, right? And then the last person, or the last one or two people, they would get a job in Donald Trump's company. They'd get to work for him. For real. I mean, actually, I think they actually got to work there. But yeah, this term, "you're fired," okay, was very common. And people knew about this from this reality TV show. So anyhow, it says here, the former reality TV stars mounting legal woes. Now, what is a woe? What's another word for woe? Or simply trouble. Okay? So if you say, "Oh, I have so many woes," or "I'm dealing with many woes," it means just troubles, problems. Okay? There's a very common term. It's an old term. If someone says, "Woe is me." Now, it seems kind of strange, right? Because woe is a 名词. And then why do you say "woe is me"? But this is an old term, and it just means I have this is terrible for me. It's just bad for me. It's terrible for me. Okay, woe is me. It means so many trouble. or this is awful, bad for me. Okay, so why don't we say together, woes? Woes. Okay, this is not a word that we use every day, but it is a word that we use sometimes. And so you can say he has many financial woes or family woes. It means problems, troubles. Okay, so, but here, what's this word we've talked about before? What does mounting mean? What's another way of saying mounting? Rising, growing, okay? The mounting trouble that he's having with his company, okay? It means it is growing and growing and growing. It keeps going, getting higher, bigger, okay? So the former reality TV star's mounting or growing legal troubles. We could say growing legal troubles. That would be another way of saying this, okay? Everybody understand? Okay. That are threatening to derail his bid to return to the Oval Office. First of all, what is the Oval Office? Yeah, the White House. It means to become president again. If you are in the Oval Office, it means you are the president. That's your office, okay? And what is oval? What does oval mean? Does anyone? Yeah. So oval is this shape. Yeah. It's not like a circle, but it's kind of like an egg. Yeah, an oval. So an Oval Office, if you're in the Oval Office, you're the president. So all these problems, these growing problems are threatening, they could derail his bid to return to the Oval Office. Now, this is a good word, derail. What does derail mean? Well, not to change direction. It means to completely destroy. Where does this word come from? Yeah, a train, a railway, right? So if the train is on the tracks, what happens when it's derailed? Well, no, it falls off the tracks. So if a train is derailed, it doesn't mean it goes onto the wrong tracks. It means it leaves the tracks. And that's a disaster, right? I mean, the train crashes, okay? So a derailment would be a very serious situation. In fact, there was a terrible tragedy in India a week ago, right? 200-300 people killed. Of course, that was caused by a train hitting another train. But when they hit the other train, both trains were derailed. Okay, so if you derail let's say you have a project, this was my plan, and my plan was derailed by something. It means that my plan was completely disrupted or destroyed or hurt, or, it just went off the tracks, basically. Does everybody understand that? So Donald Trump is making a bid. He wants to become president again, and this could completely destroy that or hurt that very badly, his plan. It could derail his plan. Okay? So why don't we say this word together? To derail. To derail. Okay. Yeah. Any questions on this? Disturb, disrupt, yeah. Destroy, I mean, any of those words. Okay, so let's read this. The hearing, just weeks after Trump denied state-level financial fraud charges. Let's say it again. Fraud charges in a separate case in Manhattan, came with the former reality TV stars mounting legal woes, threatening to derail his bid to return to the Oval Office. Oval Office. Okay, so again, bid, another word for bid would simply be attempt, right? I'm attempting to do something. He's making a bid to do something. That could be a 动词 or 名词. Okay, so anyhow, it says the U.S. government, which has never before prosecuted a former president. I guess that's true. I was going to say President Nixon was impeached, but he was pardoned by President Ford. Okay, so I guess President Nixon, I guess President Nixon was never prosecuted for a crime. Because do you know what pardon means? Okay. Well, pardon has different meanings, right? Pardon, right? If you say pardon me, right, that means excuse me, right? So if someone makes a mistake and you pardon their mistake, it means it says no problem, 没有关系, don't worry about it, no problem. But this can be a formal thing too. Like, I don't know about Taiwan. I think Taiwan's the same as America. Many countries, the president has the authority to pardon a criminal, a crime. So let's say somebody did something wrong, and they've been found guilty. They're actually guilty, right? And the president says, "Okay, I'm going to pardon your crime." That means you're not guilty anymore. Okay. So when President Nixon, when he stepped down, he resigned, right? The new president, which was his vice president,副总统福特, Ford. Is it Ford? Is that how they say it? 福特. I know the car is 福特, but anyhow, Ford, he pardoned President Nixon when he came in office. So President Nixon was never prosecuted for this crime because the other president pardoned him. So anyhow, that's a good word. Why don't we say together, pardon? Pardon. Now, again, this word can be used in a very simple, everyday way, and that can be simply to say, pardon me. If I have, if I say 对不起 or excuse me, and you need to ask somebody a question, you say, pardon me, where's the train station? Or pardon me, can you tell me how to go there? It means excuse me. Yeah. And just like, similar. Okay, so it says here, the U.S. government, which has never before prosecuted, 起诉, a former president, accuses Trump of contravening the Espionage Act and other laws when he removed classified documents upon leaving office in 2021 and failed to give them up to the U.S. National Archives. Okay, so contravene, we've talked about this before. What does this word mean? If you contravene a law or an act, simply what does that mean? To violate, to break, right? If you contravene a law or an act or something, it means you break that law, you go against it, you violate it, okay? So why don't we say together, contravening. To contravene. Okay, so that means to break, to violate. So he's accused of contravening or breaking the what? The Espionage Act. Now this act means law, right? So what is this word espionage is what does that refer to? What would be a very simple word for espionage? Spying. So if you are spying on somebody, you are involved in espionage, or you are carrying out espionage. So espionage has to do with spying. S-P-Y, spy, I-N-G, spying. Okay, so why don't we say together, espionage. Espionage. This has a j sound to it. So espionage. Espionage. Okay, so he's accused of violating or contravening the Espionage Act and other laws when he removed, and here's that word we talked about earlier, right? Classified, top secret documents upon leaving office. Of course, upon leaving office means when he left office, when he was no longer president in 2021. And then he also failed to give these documents up. Give them up means to give them back or give them up to the government or give them up to the U.S. National Archives. Now, I don't know if we've learned this word before, but does everybody know what an archive is? Yeah, it's like when you have a lot of papers and documents, records, 记录, and you put them in this special place to file them away. The government, I think the government always has an archives, but even like a library, right? 图书馆 might have an archives of old, I don't know, newspapers or something else, right? They might store a bunch of documents somewhere. It doesn't have to be official documents. It could be papers, pictures, newspapers, anything that you want to store, any kind of documents. So why don't we, and this word here, this is pronounced with a K. So it's archives. So why don't we say together, archives, archives. Right. And so the U.S. government, there's a U.S. National Archives. It's a place where all the historical documents and probably, it sounds like secret documents too, are stored. Mm-hmm. 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 Could be, yeah. I mean, it depends on how you see him, right? Some people, including some of my friends, really believe that he is an outsider who is challenging this old system that is very corrupt, that needs to change. And you know, I don't know if you remember when we talked about Donald Trump several years ago. He used the term. He said he wanted to drain the swamp, right? Let me write that for you. This is a term that he used when he was running the first time. To drain the. First of all, you know what a swamp is? It's a place where there's a lot of water and plants growing. And when we think of a swamp, often we think of a place where there's a lot of plants are rotting and it smells bad and there's a lot of 脏脏的东西 there. It's not very nice. Now, of course, a swamp can just be a normal type of environment. But when we think of swamp, it usually has kind of a negative feeling. It's not a nice place. And he wants to drain. Drain means what? To let out the water, right? So this is something perhaps in Taiwan we don't do much, but often when we want to take some swamp and we want to make it into productive, good land, we drain the water. We take the water out, and then it can grow again. We can make it into a good area. We can maybe build houses there and do something with it. So we say to drain the swamp. So he had this idea he has this idea that Washington D.C. and our American government system is very corrupt. It needs to change. There's all these politicians, including both parties, right? 共和党, 民主党, both need to change. And he says, I'm going to come in from the outside and I'm going to change it. I'm going to, so that the government will serve normal, everyday Americans. So many Americans support Donald Trump for that because he is an outsider. Yeah. I think he tried to. Again, there are certain. This is very controversial. I mean, like I've said before, some Americans really support Donald Trump, and some Americans absolutely hate Donald Trump. And so, I think there were some things that he tried to do, some changes he tried to make, and I think people who support Donald Trump say he's the kind of guy that says if he says he's going to do something, he'll do it, right? Because, a lot of politicians, when they run for office anywhere, including Taiwan, they say, I'm going to do this. And then after they become president or elected, they don't do anything, right? What do they say that? Piao or whatever. Bounce check, right? They don't do what they say. So some people say, Donald Trump, he does what he says he's going to do. If he says he's going to do something, he'll do it, right? And so that's where some people think it's kind of refreshing to have a non-politician, like a businessman, come in and run things, and they think that's good. But again, Donald Trump is he's a very divisive person. People either love him or they hate him, it seems. It doesn't seem like there's any. So anyhow, I'm sure some people look at him and they say he's a crafty businessman and he's just doing it for himself and he doesn't really care. And and then there's other people who say, no, he's good. He's changing things, or he wants to change things. So this is a very, very, very controversial. Okay, so anyhow, let's read this together. The U.S. government, which has never before prosecuted a former president, accuses Trump of contravening the Espionage Act. One more time, the Espionage Act and other laws, when he removed classified documents upon leaving office in 2021 and failed to give them up to the U.S. National Archives. Archives. Right. Okay. Yeah, and you know, there was, I remember, because when I wrote the word pardon, I know some people said, oh, well, you know, he should be pardoned. Some people said he should be, right? And some people said he should not be. But yeah, he's a former president who was prosecuted and found guilty in Taiwan. So yeah, in Taiwan this has happened before, but in the U.S. it has not happened. So yeah, authorities say he conspired to thwart investigators and knowingly shared national security secrets with people who did not have the requisite clearance. Okay, so if you have a classified or top secret document, to officially to see that document, you need to have clearance. And what would be another word for clearance? Even more simple word. If I give you clearance to do something, I give you the rights, or even another word starts with a P. Power, I guess you could say, but I'm thinking of the word permission, right? You know, I have permission to do this. I have permission to enter that. I'm permitted to do that. So if I receive clearance to do something, it means I'm allowed to do that. Okay, usually in an official way. So you can say, now requisite would be another very, very, very similar word to requisite. Yeah, I heard someone say it, required. Required. I have the requisite qualifications for this job. I have required qualifications. So requisite is simply another word of saying required. I must have this. The requisite clearance. To look at a top secret document, yeah, of course, you need to have requisite or required permission or clearance or authority. Okay, you must be allowed to do that. Does everybody understand that? Let's read that word together. Requisite. Requisite. So just, you know, you can see it's very similar to the word required. Let's say another word, clearance. Clearance. There's many kinds of clearance, right? One that comes to mind just now is, you know, if you're flying an airplane and you're the pilot, right? And you're flying around the airport, you need clearance to land, right? And clearance to take off. Because if you just sleep in, land, or take off, you might have a disaster. You might hit another airplane, right? So the flight controller has to give you clearance to land the airplane or to take off. That means permission, authority. Okay. So what would be a very simple word for the word conspired? He what? If you conspire against somebody, you conspire to do something. There's a very simple word. Plan, or another word, what? Someone said it. Plot, yes. Scheme. So there's that word again, scheme. That's an S. To plot, to plan, to scheme. So that means to conspire. When you conspire against someone, or it usually is a secret. It's not like open, right? So that's why we use the word often. We talk about a conspiracy, right? It's like a secret plan or plot. You know, there's many conspiracy theories, right? Out there. Like, remember, I don't know if you remember when 9/11, there were people who said, oh no, the US government did this. This wasn't 恐怖分子. They did this, you know. It was a conspiracy theory. Or, you know, any other thing that happens in the world today, often there's like another idea about what happened, what really happened, okay? So why don't we say together, conspiracy. Conspiracy. Of course, this here is a 形容词 when we connect it to theory, but it can be a 名词, a conspiracy. There, you could say there is a conspiracy against me, right? They're plotting against me, okay? Why don't we say these two words? Conspiracy theory. conspiracy theory. And then this word, conspired. Conspired. Okay, so the government or the authorities say he conspired or plotted or schemed to do what? To thwart investigators. Now, this is a good word that I don't think we've ever used before. What is, if you thwart someone's plan or you thwart somebody, what does that mean? Yeah, but it's kind of like to disrupt or to not push back. It's like the idea of to prevent. To prevent. Actually, that's a very simple way of putting it. To prevent something. So let's say somebody has a plan and then you thwart their plan. It means you interfere to prevent that plan from happening. Let's say somebody is trying to carry something out and you thwart that. It means you interfere, you get involved, you do something to disrupt or prevent them from doing it. Does that make sense? Okay. So why don't we say together, thwart. It's a funny word because it has a W. Thwart. Thwart. Okay. So yeah, you can say I was thwarted. I wanted to do that, but he thwarted my plan or my effort. Okay. Yeah, you could. You could say I tried to score a goal and he thwarted he got in the way. He prevented me from scoring a goal, or we were thwarted from winning the game, So yeah, it can be used in many ways. So he conspired to thwart investigators and knowingly, of course, means he actually knew on purpose, 故意的. He knowingly shared national security secrets with people who did not have the required permission or clearance. Okay? So let's read this together. Authorities say he conspired to thwart investigators. One more time. Thwart investigators. And knowingly shared national security secrets. National security secrets with people who did not have the requisite clearance. Again, requisite clearance. Okay. Yeah. Requisite. Yeah. If you say, what are the requisite? What's the requisite? What you can even use this as a noun. What are the requisites for this job? It means the requirements for this job. So it can be used as a 形容词, but sometimes it's also used as a noun, I believe. The requisites. Okay, so it's a good word. Okay, let's go to a different story then. Any questions on this one? About this story? Okay. Well, I feel like it's so much mafan with this court case and all this. I just honestly, I don't really look forward to having this reading about this every day in the news, because it just becomes a big trouble. But yeah, I mean, if he committed a crime, then he committed a crime. Let's see here. There was another story I was looking at. Okay, this one was very unusual. I saw this story, and at first I didn't pay attention to it, and then I thought, this is kind of odd. Very controversial, because normally the government doesn't go, a normal government, a free government would not go after a comedian. But in this case, they're pursuing a comedian. Okay, so it says here, Malaysia seeks Interpol to help find U.S. comedian. Now, what is a comedian? What does a comedian do? Right, they tell jokes, right? So, if you watch, sometimes you say on TV, I watched a comedy. A comedy would be a funny TV show, right? Now, if you say this person is very comical, or this TV, that's a C-A-L, so I don't know what's going on there. C-O-M-I-C-A-L, comical as a 形容词. You can say that movie was very comical, or that person is very comical. It means they're very funny. Okay? So now I will say, even though this says comical, the word comic, or sometimes people say comics, has actually a different meaning. A comic could actually be a comedian. But a comic, when I think of a comic, what are we thinking about? Do you know what a comic is? Or a comic book? Yeah, manhua. It's like manhua. So you could say, I like to read the comics, or I like, now in the newspaper, I don't know about Taiwanese newspapers, but I know in English newspapers, there's often comics that you can read, like Snoopy, yeah, Peanut. It's called Peanuts, right? But yeah, we say, and often we call that a comic. Let me just write this. Strip, yeah, very good. A comic strip. And why is it called a comic strip? Right, because it runs in a strip. It's like a line, right? So we say a comic strip. So you can say, I read the Peanuts comic strip every day, okay? Or we can have a comic book, a book, like you like to read about Spider-Man or Batman or something like that, be a comic book. So a comic book does not have to be funny. It's just like a cartoon. It's like manhua, something like that. But anyhow, here we have a comedy. We say, I went to see a comedy, or you can say that movie was very comical, or that person was very comical. So this word gets used in many different ways. Why don't we say this one first? Comedian. Comedian. Comedy. Comedy. Comical. Comical. Comics. Comics. Comic strip. Comic strip. Okay, so Malaysia seeks, okay, they're talking to Interpol. Now, what is Interpol? Does anyone know what that? Yeah, it's under the UN, the Interpol, right? It's like a global police organization. Usually, most countries are involved. I know Taiwan is not because of this whole situation with China. But anyhow, why don't we say together, Interpol? Interpol. Okay, so they're looking for this U.S. comedian, which it's kind of like, what? What are they? Why? So here it says, Malaysia yesterday asked Interpol to help track down a U.S. comedian, police said, after her joke about the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 sparked fury and even an apology from Singapore. So you know what flight MH370 is, right? It's that airplane that took off and disappeared. They still haven't found it. It disappeared in the Indian Ocean. Probably the Indian Ocean somewhere, but they still haven't found it. And of course, it was a tragedy. These people disappeared. They probably are dead. But so they asked Interpol to track down. Of course, track down is another way of saying what? Or find. If let's say you're looking for a product, okay. When I was in Ryosho, Okinawa, there's a Japanese rock group, Yaogun Yuetuan, that I really love, and you cannot find their music in Taiwan. So I went all over Okinawa trying to track down their CDs. Okay. Now I know you probably think I'm crazy because nobody buys CDs anymore, but I do. I'm very old-fashioned. They sing in Japanese, yeah. So anyhow, I was looking all over, and I walked into a shopping mall, into a CD store, and to my delight, I was very happy. I found 2 of their CDs, so of course I immediately bought them. But I was trying to track down their CDs. So when you're looking very hard to try to find something, we say I'm trying to, or you say I'm trying to track him down. Maybe you're a friend, you have an old 老朋友 or 同学, classmate, and you haven't seen them in 30 years. You say, I'm trying to track down my old classmate. I'm trying to find him or her. Okay? So they asked Interpol to help track down a U.S. comedian after her joke about the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 70. This flight sparked fury. Now, we've talked about this. Spark means to cause, to create. Fury means what? Very great anger. And if someone is very, very angry, we say they are what? Furious, okay? I am furious about that situation. I am furious that my plan was thwarted. There's another word we learned. So why don't we say it together? Furious. Furious. Fury. Fury. Okay, so it created fury, and even it resulted in an apology from Singapore. I'm not sure why. Well, we'll see, of course. But even though she's American, why is it an apology from Singapore? Okay, so let's read this together. Malaysia yesterday asked Interpol to help track down a U.S. comedian, police said, after her joke about the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 sparked fury and even an apology from Singapore. Let's say this word again, apology. Right. Now, if you say I'm sorry, you say I apologize, Gize. You know, when I was a kid, you know, if I said something to my sister that made her angry, my parents might say, please apologize to her, right? Or, yeah, usually it was me that had to apologize. Okay, anyhow. I probably did, yeah. I feel like she needed to apologize to me, but it was always, maybe because I was the older brother, I had to apologize more. So anyhow, so here it says, Jocelyn Jia told her joke during a set at the Comedy Cellar in New York City. Oh, so this was in New York. Reportedly in April, as she riffed on the historically testy relationship between Malaysia and Singapore, where she was raised. Okay, so this woman, she's a comedian. I guess she's American, but she was raised. She grew up in Singapore. Okay, so I guess we could call her a Singaporean American. So she told the joke during a set. Now, when we say a set, this is a word that's used for a performance, right? So it's usually like a single performance. Like, for example, if we have a band, you know, 乐团 comes and plays, we might say they're going to play one hour set or 45-minute set. It's like one performance. Now maybe they play 2 or 3 sets, but those are separate performances. Okay, but here it's a comedy show. So she told this joke during her comedy set. It was like she got up and maybe she talked for, you know, I don't know, 30 minutes or 15 minutes at the Comedy Cellar in New York City. Now, this is obviously, you can see here, this is a capital C. So this is the name of a place. But what is, I want to ask you, what is a cellar? It's a basement, right? 地下室, I guess a place. Often, like, you know, you've probably heard people have sometimes a wine cellar, right? If they have a lot of 葡萄酒 and they want to keep it cool, they have a special cellar where they store their wine. Okay, but a cellar could be like a basement. And of course, I think you know the word basement, but basement is also the same idea. Although we don't say a wine basement, we say a wine cellar. Yeah, so why don't we say together, cellar, cellar, basement, basement. Okay, so she told this joke as she riffed on. Okay, now this word it's not a very common word, but to riff, it's kind of like to joke on, or to, it's also like if you sing a song, you have a line from that song. Sometimes we say that's a riff from that song. It's like a line or a phrase from that song. So, you know, many songs have very famous riffs, right? Any pop song probably has a line in that song that everybody knows, right? I'm not going to sing to you. So, yeah. So anyhow, why don't we say together, riff, riff. Okay, so here it's used as a 动词, but it can also be a 名词. So she riffed, she was joking about the historically testy relationship. Now, there's another word. What does testy mean? Yeah, it's a very, not sensitive, but irritable, irritating, okay? So if you feel testy about something, it means you're very irritated by it. It's like, it's not the same as being furious, right? Furious means you're super angry, but if you said, I got very testy about his behavior, it means I got kind of upset and irritated by his behavior. It just makes me feel, not happy, okay? So it's that idea, it's kind of this little bit angry, a little bit irritable, not happy, okay? So why don't we say together, testy. Testy. Okay, so historically, in history, there's a testy relationship between Malaysia and Singapore. You know, Singapore used to be part of Malaysia, right, at the very beginning, and then they became independent. So there's kind of been a bit of tension between those two countries sometimes. Okay, so let's read this together then. Jocelyn Jia told the joke during a set at the Comedy Cellar in New York City. Reportedly in April, as she riffed on the historically testy relationship. Let's say those three words again. Historically testy relationship between Malaysia and Singapore, where she was raised. Okay. It says MH370 or 370 went missing in March 2014 and is one of Malaysia's deadliest aviation incidents, with all 239 people on board presumed dead. Now, why do they say presumed dead? Yeah, because what is to presume? To presume is to say, what does that mean? Yeah, it's like the word, what's a very, very, very similar word to presume? Yes, to assume. They sound similar too, to assume, right? So let's say, for example, I could say to you right now, I presume that after this class is over, you're all going to go eat lunch, right? Of course. You know, that's what we do at 12 o'clock. We go eat lunch, right? So I would presume that, or I would assume that. I presume that you enjoy warm weather. Now maybe that's the wrong assumption or presumption. So the word assumption, if you want to turn this into a noun, we have presumption. Presumption and assumption. Now, sometimes I might say I made the wrong assumption about him, or presumption. I said I assume that, but maybe it's not correct. Maybe you don't eat lunch, right? So anyhow, the reason why they say presumed dead is because they never found this airplane, right? They don't have any bodies. They don't know where it is. So they presume that they are dead. I guess we could say they assume they're dead, but this is probably a slightly better word, to presume. They found some pieces of the airplane, right? They've washed up around the edge of the Indian Ocean, like in Sri Lanka or some of these places. They find a piece of that airplane. So yeah, I think we can probably presume that everyone is dead and the airplane crashed in the ocean, but we don't absolutely know for 100%. Now remember earlier I talked about conspiracy theories? Of course, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories about what happened to this airplane. Some people say, it was hijacked. Some people say the pilot killed himself. Some people say, who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of things. Okay, so why don't we say this word together? Presumed. Presumed. Assumed. Assumed. Presumption. Presumption. Assumption. Assumption. Right, so we might tell you, someone might tell you, please don't make the wrong assumption about me. Okay, don't assume that I am this way. Okay, so anyhow, it's the deadliest, or one of the deadliest aviation. Of course, aviation means like hangtai, right? Airplane related aviation incidents. Okay, I don't know. I guess you could say accidents, but we don't actually even know what happened. So why don't we say together, aviation? Aviation. Okay, so let's read this. MH370 went missing in March 2014 and is one of Malaysia's deadliest aviation incidents. With all 239 people on board presumed dead. Right. Now, of course, I'm sure you probably know, deadliest, of course, means it killed the most people. You can say that was a deadly accident, but this is one of the deadliest. It's the most deadly. Okay. Such was the outrage over Jia's joke that Malaysia police began an investigation under incitement and offensive online content laws. Okay, so I think we've talked about what is outrage. Great anger. Now you know the word rage, right? R-A-G-E is like fury, right? Rage. Fury comes from the word furious. F-U-R-Y. Rage. R-A-G-E. Rage. So outrage can be a 名词 or a 动词. Here it's a noun, right? There is so much outrage over this, but you can say, I feel outraged. Well, I guess that's not. I was outraged by this, or I feel outraged. So he was outraged by my comments. Okay. So such was, it means there was so much outrage, or outrage was so much over Jia's joke that Malaysian police began an investigation under incitement. Now, I think we've talked about this before. If you incite somebody to do something, what does that mean? Yeah, right. It could be, I guess it could be good or bad, but to incite somebody means to trigger them, to cause them to do something. Now, what in this kind of case, what is being incited? What are they inciting? People are incited to anger, right? If you incite somebody to anger, it means you say something or you do something that makes them very, very angry. Now, you can incite somebody to violence, right? If you say or do something and people start fighting, like I'll give you an example. We were just talking about Donald Trump, right? He was accused of inciting his followers after the last election. Remember, they all went to Washington, D.C., and they went in there, they started rioting, and they caused all this trouble. So you could say he incited them to do that. He said things, and they all went and did something. So this word incitement means to cause or create, to trigger somebody to do something. Okay, so under incitement and offensive online content laws. Now, of course, I'm sure that her joke was online. So offensive online content. What does offensive mean? It what? It makes people angry or hurts people. So basically it offends me. Okay? If something offends you, maybe someone does something or says something that offends, somebody. To offend me, it means makes me angry or does something to me. Now, of course, not all offensive things are illegal, right? You can do many things that offend people, but they're not always illegal. But if I say that's, for example, I say something that's very racist, that's offensive and it could be illegal, right? Depending on where you are. Okay, so let's read this together. Such was the outrage over Jia's joke that Malaysian police began an investigation under incitement and offensive online content laws. Okay. Now, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that incitement laws means that you incite somebody to do something, like go to riot or do something, you know, like that, because your language is so strong or whatever. Okay. So here it says, Malaysian Inspector General of Police Akril Sani Abdullah Sani said on Tuesday they would ask Interpol to help locate her. The Malaysia news agency Bernama report. I don't think we have to read that, but let's keep going. It says the head of police in the southern state of Johor, Kamarul Zaman Mamat, these are long names, said in a statement yesterday that the request had been filed. Okay, let's keep going. I want to find out more about this. It says Jia is being probed under public mischief laws that carry a jail term of up to 2 years. Jia, who has roots in Singapore, said in her routine that it had since become a first world country and that Malaysian airplanes cannot fly. Okay, so she was joking about this. So okay, she is being investigated under public mischief laws. Now, this word mischief normally means what? If you create mischief or you carry out mischief, what does that mean? Yeah. So children are often accused of mischief. It means you do some 小事情 to create trouble for somebody, you know. And if we say, often we talk about, you know, what we say in Chinese, 顽皮, right? We say a child is often, we say mischievous. I think I'm spelling that correctly. Mischievous, or is it mischief? Is that correct? There's no I here, is there? I think this is correct. Mischievous. Okay. Mischief. I think this is mischievous. I don't know. Some people say mischievous. Mischievous. Yeah. Mischievous. Mischievous. Yes. You can see it's a word I don't use very often. Mischievous. I think it's mischievous. Mischievous. Yeah. So anyhow, mischievous is a word that we use to describe a 顽皮 or a 小孩子 that likes to create some trouble. It's nothing serious usually. Okay. Why don't we say together mischievous? Mischievous. Okay. Mischief. Mischief. Okay. But here, this is obviously a crime, right? Because you can get a jail term for up to 2 years. It means to create public trouble. So I'm guessing, again, I'm not a legal expert, but I'm guessing that if you said something that made everybody really angry, maybe you caused them to go out and riot or, you know, protests or kangi, and you made this big trouble, that's public mischief. You're causing public trouble for everybody. You're making the public angry, okay? So this can have a jail term of up to 2 years. Now, it says here, Jia said in her routine. Now, in a routine, you know, routine is like your schedule, right? But when we have a comedy show, you know, we tell jokes, we talk about that session as your comedy routine. It's like the jokes that you tell as part of your comedy show. We call that a routine. So this isn't like my schedule, my daily schedule. This is like a different idea. So she said in her show or her routine that it had since become a first world country and Malaysian airplanes cannot fly. Of course, that would be very offensive to people in Malaysia, I think. So anyhow, let's read this, and then I think it looks like we're out of time. Yeah. To be honest, I don't know what she means by this. Because, you know what a third world country is, right? I don't know. I don't know what, see here the problem is, I don't know what it means. I don't know if she's talking about Malaysia, because if you said Malaysia is a first world country, that sounds good, right? I mean, that seems like a compliment. It's not a third world country, it's a first world country. But then she says, of course, this part here is offensive or could hurt people or make them upset. Malaysian Airlines going missing, not funny, huh? She continues, some jokes don't land. Well, you know, this airplane did not land, so some jokes don't land. I don't understand her humor. So anyhow, maybe it's Singaporean humor. So anyhow, I'm not quite sure what that means. Yeah. So anyhow, let's read this, and then I think we're out of time. Jia is being probed under public mischief laws that carry a jail term of up to 2 years. Jia, who has roots in Singapore, said in her routine that it had since become a first world country and that Malaysian airplanes cannot fly. Okay, so I don't quite understand what her, you know, I understand why that's that second part is offensive to Malaysia, but yeah, I don't quite understand the rest of the humor. So yeah, maybe the Singaporeans have their own humor. So okay, anyhow, that's all we have time for. But any final questions? Anything? Nothing? Okay. Well, anyhow, have a good 2 weeks, and we'll see you what? July 6th. Okay. So I guess I should wish you an early happy American Independence Day. Okay, we'll see you.
好，再麻烦各位一下，如果还没有填这个问卷，再帮我填一下。6月份我们需要有一个问卷的调查。好，谢谢。